Nicholas.
Nick.
We have a few other folks joining us, so we've got
harassment from them about the situation.
Okay, that's a hostile work environment. That's a great example, Rosemary, for the class. All right. Other examples, either that you've known of or heard of or been in assignments at this point in time.
One more time. We're going to take any subject matter that we've studied up to this point, or just completely, and wouldn't hold up a conversation unless they absolutely had to, but would talk about you behind your back, and they were friends with everybody, but not with me or some of my coworkers.
Which is usually 7 to 10.
It kind of gave us the Iceman for.
How did that way, if you want to use a 25 font or something like that, I can still accurately do that. So, did I answer your question, Nick? Someone else gets to deal with that, right?
Yeah, and
next lesson, we just need to.
Administration just said he's too valuable and an employee. We can't get rid of him.
Okay. Unfortunately. All right. Yeah. Any other examples from the text or from real life? Conclusion and bibliography.
State, and she was being she was in a hostile environment, and it affected her owner, and the owner said that he would train her on a certain project and certain program, and she didn't really.
4 problems, 4 solutions. That whole 7 days.
Trained her for I think 3 days, and then said, "Okay, here you go, figure it out." And if something went wrong, then the owner or the owner's sons or their project managers all over her case about it. And so I said, "You need to talk to somebody." And she goes, "They don't have an HR department. It's just a small company." And, it's going to be on because if they...
Excuse me, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
A great day, but it's the response to that you're talking about. From at least that's what I take, Leanne, that says, hey, you know what? They didn't go back and say, oh, you're right, let's get you some more training, or let's help, or it was pretty much the finger pointing at her that she was the problem. Am I taking that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Good point. And that's very difficult and can be very, again, it can take a normal problem and make life much, much worse. Okay, very good. Heavy here. Not much from you yet. Anything that you would add to that discussion?
I had an experience many years ago where it was just the opposite, where we had someone that was difficult, and we were able to get him removed, but it took a lot of work. Well, they had to say, well, if we get rid of him, are you going to be able to pick up back?
A different idea, so I'm glad that I came tonight.
It is. And again, you don't have that's a week from Saturday. Okay. And to make sure everybody that's watching that is that, again, every time that paper is due, there is an assignment with 4 problems and 4 solutions each time. Again, adding an addition and a bibliography. 7 to 10 pages, 2,500 to 5,000. Excuse me, 3,500 to 5,000. The concept of harassment says that whatever the organization is, we have a responsibility to provide a comfortable work environment. That doesn't mean it's problem-free. That doesn't mean you don't have any issues. That doesn't mean
you have a lot of work to do in the next week.
Yeah, and think about it. Those things are there. We deal with them in an open, communicative way, and if hurt feelings, things continue to be there. We fix it. We don't just let people suffer in sense or in vocal fashion where you take on the world by yourself. Everybody watching the recording, and for anybody here, hopefully that clears that up. All right, I wanted to take a minute and share a scripture with you if it comes back again. So one of us can howl if you'd like to. I wanted to share Alma and Amulek in the beginning chapter of Alma. Have always been some of my favorite scriptures. You have Amulek, this person that's not a believer, not a member of the church. He has such an amazing event or otherwise.
Yeah.
Meets the prophet, Alma, takes him into his home, and basically what kind of harassment is there? Let's talk about that for a minute. We haven't kind of covered all those. And they had power to do such great work, and In Alma chapter 8, this is after that Alma and Amulek had been together for a while, and this is after time together. Alma chapter 8, verse 29, it says, "And the word came to Alma, saying, Go," and again, this tells me that Alma is listening. He listens to what the Lord or the Spirit told him. It says, "Go," excuse me. "And the word came to Alma, saying, Go, also saying to my servant Amulek, Go forth and prophesy unto this people, saying, Repent ye, for thus saith the Lord, except you repent."
Sometimes that can be an issue.
"Among the people, to declare the words of God unto them." And here's the part. We've got a few more. One, and they had.
Can we have discrimination in hiring, like, hiring?
They had power given unto them, insomuch that they could not be confined in dungeons, could slay them. So people attempted to throw them in a dungeon. Couldn't happen. People attempted to slay them. Harassment on religious grounds. Lynn, were you adding power? Until they were bound and banned.
Or origin as well, because even though you have discrimination, you still have people.
That was a great opportunity, and those things were done by power. They were not done in weakness. The Lord blessed Alma and Amulek with power to be able to make those wonderful converts happen, and all the goodness that came out of the ministry that Alma and Amulek had. A very difficult ministry. But I know classwork done to try to hold our families together. If a tragedy at home, they could just be in a bad mood. That's not the kind of stuff we're talking about, because sorry. And so that's a key scripture that I really wonderful and really do enjoy. So I say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen. That goes along with this is what I call does not pass the light of day test, meaning if you had a light you shone on this and everybody saw what was going on, would everybody be okay with that? If that's not the case, it probably is harassment. The thing I would add is that it can be also harassment even if the entire group goes along with it. Okay? So, and I'm going to give an example of that in a minute, but so you've got all the different kinds of things that can be harassment. The thing I want to do is two things. I want to talk about how we fix this, and then I want to make sure I give, again, this harassment. We'll kind of wrap up with that. So I've got anything, racial, religious, you name it, all those types of harassment, gender, men, women, all that good stuff. So how, if I'm two things, if I'm of this, what is it I have a responsibility to do? I'm not the manager, I'm not the boss, I'm the victim. What? Jenna, got a definition for us?
I would say doing anything that makes another person uncomfortable.
All kinds of things like that. Now, does that answer to this? And it's always multiple facets. All right? Okay. Now,
here's also a situation. Say an employee does report it to the EEOC.
Yeah.
okay. Most of the time, and it certainly can
By law.
to come up and, grab somebody and take their clothes off, or crazy things like that. So that doesn't happen very often in today's world very much. But the other is that when it's happening in your own, come that in a minute.
Okay.
The trick is that, let me stay with you as the employee. As the employee, you have a responsibility, I think, to report it, but you have to be smart about it. A lot of there's retaliation and other issues like that. There are times I think you take it to the government, which is
Her mic's off.
Oh.
Turn your mic on.
all right, and you
About harassment. It's whether it's a perceived harassment, because I thought it was interesting, a question that came up about, but it wasn't to the actual individual that was happening to.
the company. What do you do?
The picture on.
Rosemary?
I know I work for the government, so we have a set. is within your organization and follow that.
Very good. Okay, I agree with that. What else? Jennifer, any thoughts from you?
Sorry, I'm putting stuff out, so it's noisy.
No problem. This was, I don't know, 70s, 80s.
You, as the employer,
Sexual harassment was something called quid pro quo. And I guess this could still happen, but most people aren't
necessary to make your workplace,
mean.
My
Right.
question on this is what is our
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think actually,
a promotion or that you lose your job. You lose your job if you don't cooperate with what they want.
hostile environment.
all right. So quid pro quo. I don't think you necessarily have to invite other issues. I think my take is you investigate it with an eye to really find out what this is. You try to find out the concern. Then you address, which is nothing, unless I'm jumping the gun here. Again, most people today are not that stupid. That hostile work environment that says, I have to fix this team so that doesn't happen. So if it's blatant, you can usually get away with that as an
Could be a whole lot of.
You're not going to just usually put them on a written warning and say, don't ever do that again. You can fire people and make those things happen. So I think that's the responsibility of the company. And again, Jennifer summed it up very well. You fix the problem, period. You don't ignore it. Because again, now I'm going to come back to defense. If your spouse or your kids or your mother or your dad were in a hostile work environment, would you want them to be?
And so we were testing, and I caught one of the people that had been in the class with me giving the answers to another person that was going to be taking the class, and it was shocked. And so I went to a friend of mine that was a supervisor and explained it, like we read in the you had to report it up, and it came down to me, and because I was the only person that saw it, I had to be lying. So nothing was done about it, but my immediate supervisor told the two people that were he shouldn't have, and I had to suffer for about 2 months harassment from them about the situation.
pursue it up the chain of command if I try and take care of it on the level.
And I think maybe if that's the kind of thing where you say, you know what, I'm just going to ignore this and think I got it fixed and not my boss, that may not be very good judgment. Or there are other things that you maybe should have done that haven't, so that may kind of fit into the same thing you're talking about, is fix the problem.
How would you say that? Covertly hostile?
Okay. Go sue or whatever the case might be. Let me give you a few examples of real-life harassment. I'm going to start with one that is jokes. This is a big deal. This is men and women. It does not have a gender issue. Just so you know how the laws go on the equal employment, and this is mainly on the harassment side. This is how serious this is. You can have a group, and you have a person, say it's one of you, that counts themselves as a religious person, and they don't participate in that. They feel ostracized, and they quit because they feel like they're harassed. That's pretty normal.
Went up to administration. Administration just said he's too valuable and an employee. We can't get rid of him.
That person that's offended by this, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right. Examples from the text or from real life, and goes and files a suit and will win but speak up. And I shouldn't have had this problem in my workplace in the first place. So I've got the one that left and had a problem. I've got the one that stayed and had a problem. I've got another one for you. On
The owner, and the owner said that he would train her certain project and certain program, and she didn't really, I mean, she knew, it was like an accounting program, and she knew accounting, but they only trained her for, I think, 3 days, and then said, okay, here you go, figure it out. And if
they felt pressured into doing it?
Or their project managers were all over a case about it, and so I said, you need to talk to somebody.
Sued the company and won. There are several examples of that in recent years where that's been the case. So here's what I would say when it comes to harassment. The company has to know there are no excuses of, well, gee, I didn't know that was happening. That's just not how that works. So let me give you a real life example for me. I won't tell you what company it was that I was the HR person with. It was a few years ago. It was a plant, manufacturing plant. We worked on multiple shifts, and this occurred. It was a 24/7 operation, and this occurred in the warehouse on third shift, kind of in the deep dark. Not everybody goes and pays attention to this. When a new employee came on, there was this initial a normal problem and make life much, much worse. Okay, very good. All right, others. Nicole, not much from you yet. Anything that you would add to that discussion?
Oh,
And got some information. Here's what was happening. The new employee would come on board, and there was this hazing or this initiation. Again, this happened to me.
a lot of work because he was valuable, and they had to say, well, if we get rid of him, are you going
Grab him and hold him by both.
So it's kind of hard when there's a problem and they do their work, but it's uncomfortable for everyone that works with them.
The example, and normally Carolyn's our hospital person. I don't see her tonight. Hopefully she's bothered by those tornadoes and things because she's in Texas as well. The concept of harassment says that whatever the organization is, we have a responsibility of their person against this other person.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean somebody might even occasionally raise their voice. What it does mean is that when those things are there, we deal with them in an open, communicative way, and if there's hurt feelings, we do our best to solve those. Well, we did the investigation, found out it was clear who was at fault. In a company that fired people rarely, if ever, we fired the ringleaders of this immediately. This was in a small town in Arizona here, and so the factory was well known. It was the biggest employer in town. It's not bad, but you might want to mute your mic. There you go. We'll remind you if it comes back again. So one of us can howl if you'd like. It's a made-up story.
Wow.
Other examples that I've dealt with include other people, I'm trying to be delicate in how I say this, rubbing parts of their person on other people that you would even, that ever happened, where we took action on people. Foul mouth issues, jokes, other things like that where we've taken action, and just plain old mean behavior. And now that doesn't necessarily have to be, there's all different kinds of that. That can be men working with women, that can be women working with men. Then you have the whole issue of same-sex attraction. And they said, oh my gosh, let's take care of this, and we have. People and managers to find these issues, correct them, and get taken care of. One is same-gender attraction, where people will ask people on dates that are uncomfortable. They'll ask somebody of the same gender to go out on a date. That's not unusual anymore in the workplace. You have to monitor.
You?
Absolutely. Very much so. And that's a power thing lots of times. What more? Any examples that you guys have seen about this concept of harassment that you think fit this? Okay.
A joke gone awry. I've got a worker that's been trying for about the past 2 months to diet, and she's addicted to chocolate and Dr. Pepper. And you know, many of us have the same addictions. And another coworker has on numerous times deliberately sabotaged her diet by saying, "Oh, you're cranky. Here, let me pour you a soda," or "Oh, you know, you're just."
Sexual orientation of all kinds of things. I mean, there can be harassment over what football team you like, or you know, there can be all kinds of things that make an uncomfortable or a hostile work environment. And one of the things I want to kind of talk about before we go any further is a hostile does not mean somebody had a bad day. There are bad days in the office. There's life that happens. Somebody could have a tragedy at home. They could just be in a bad mood. That's not the kind of stuff we're.
And it finally took her almost breaking down in tears and saying, "I don't want to work with you anymore. You have made my life a sheer hell. Don't do this to me anymore. And the saboteur kind of had a light bulb moment and went, I'm really
The light of day test, meaning if you had a light you shone on this and everybody saw what was going on, would everybody not the case? It probably is harassment. It can be also harassment even if the entire group goes along with it. Harassment was in the workplace that you know of and saw or knew of somebody else that addressed it or had it?
My husband had it.
Okay.
His was different though. He was working in, he was a teacher, but he was also a coach. Problem was his boss, the principal, his daughter was on the team, and so he was constantly harassed about how
All that good stuff. So how if I'm two things. If I'm a
to do what they wanted him to do. And it was awful. He loved coaching, and to watch him get to it was very sad. It was very, very hostile, and it was weird. The politics there, it was hard to know. You couldn't. It was the boss that was.
and that's the kind of thing where when we talk about like we heard, I think it was one of you guys said this earlier, is that there are times when you have the government to go to because that's what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully these things are settled in the company, but again, in this case, it sounds like if he chose to do that, that wouldn't be, and it sounds like it for the rest of his career.
Coach anymore.
Thank you for that example, Nicole. I'm sorry to hear about that.
Is required by law, I guess, to report.
Coming back to the gospel, we know better. We should never do this, tolerate this, or accept this for somebody else. If it's punishment, we need to fix it. If it's somebody, you have a responsibility, I think, to report it, but you have to be smart about it. Lots of times there's retaliation and other issues like that. There are times I think you take it to the government, which is the EOC. I think there's times you take it internal, and hopefully there's never a time where you truly ignore it, because that just makes life miserable for everybody. So let me ask you this now. You're the employer, all right, and employer. A piece that's working, but these are difficult things that just shouldn't happen, and the HR people need to be not only the police but to help us and make it work.
Right.
So it's not simple as just being a cop and saying no, you can't do that. You got to work through it and kind of come out the other side of that whole thing.
I had a great example of that just happened to me about 2-3 months ago. So I was sexually harassed by another man at work.
Rosemary?
I was going to say, I know I work for the government, so we have a set, so to speak, part of your responsibility is to know what that chain of command type thing is within your organization and follow that.
And I had two coworkers in front of me, and they heard the conversation but didn't know what happened. And so I knew he was joking, but it was just across, and the fact that he was a manager is different levels.
Yeah.
Thing with the harassment, and that you take whatever steps are necessary.
This is just creeping me out to no end. And so everybody in my department gave me a huge thumbs down and said, do not take this anywhere. He's untouchable. People have approached him before.
The very end of your comments were, say that you can remember.
Like miserable.
Environment.
Agreed. Nick, I would say that's the answer. I don't think you necessarily go to the government and tell them, oh no, there's a problem.
So I eventually took it to HR.
This is my take as an HR person. You investigate it.
And I was fine with it. I just
Then you address.
Sue, I'm not completely offended. I know it was supposed to be a joke, but I know it's also wrong. So HR and had a conversation with him, and then kind of just gave the clear directive that if you retaliate and Nick comes back to us saying that you retaliated, you will be fired that day.
Happen. So if it's blatant and a person deserves to be fired, great, go ahead and do that. You do that as an event, someone touches someone in the wrong place,
And ended up
not going to just usually put them on a written
telling her blank, 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 or quit. And
Now I'm going to come back to a gospel sense. If your spouse or your kids or your mother or your dad were in a hostile work environment, would you want them to be there? People that kind of positions. He's lucky he's still a child of God and deserves to work in a place that is free of those kind of things. Bullying, harassment, you name it. You shouldn't have to work in a place that is uncomfortable. Doesn't mean it has to be perfect, but I think you as a manager have a responsibility to fix those things. And I guess, Nick, is that a satisfactory answer, or is that good enough, or is that just too general?
No, that'll work.
If it's too general, say that's not.
I just want to make sure there's not some hard cut fast.
That's perfect. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what
To me with a problem that I'm not opening myself up to the chain of command.
ignore this and think I got it fixed and not tell my boss. That may not be very good judgment. Or there are other things that you maybe should have done that haven't, so that may kind of fit into the same thing you're talking about. I think the issue is fix the problem, make sure the employee's okay, and then your pseudo family there, and you think it's gone. Well, la-di-da, that's not going to help much. That employee may still quit and go sue. Or let me give you a few examples of real life harassment, and I'm going to start with one that is jokes. This is a big deal. This is men and women. It does not have a gender issue. Just so you know how the laws go on the equal employment, and you have a person, say it's one of you, that counts themselves as a religious person, and they don't participate in that. They feel ostracized, and they quit because they feel like they're harassed. That's pretty normal. That you guys can get. The way the laws are now, I can be that person that's offended by this. I can be that person that is offended by this and says nothing ever, and goes and files a suit and will win because I shouldn't have had to speak up, and I shouldn't have had this conflict, if you will. Agree, disagree, and anything else you'd add to that, because that was a great question that Nicole asked. It's even there have been cases that employees that participated told bad jokes themselves, told things. They filed sexual harassment or hostile work environment lawsuits and won. And anybody want to take a guess as to why that happened? So they were participating.
They felt pressured into doing it.
Opportunity too. I mean, not everybody's going to, but we have one in our group that kind of takes things a little bit farther sometimes, and I say, hey, that's going a little bit too far, you know, and I let them know. But I know that
when it comes to harassment, is the company has to know there are no excuses. Hard to do those sometimes. Lynn Ann, did you just think?
In groups, a lot of people might be scared to say anything to the group.
And this occurred. It was
affected by it.
And this occurred in the warehouse on third shift, kind of in the deep dark. You know, not everybody goes and pays attention. When a new employee came on, there was this initiation right, and this is a Fortune 50 company that right under our noses we had no idea.
Right away, because you must not continue.
Okay, very good. Information. Here's what was happening. The new employee would come on board, and there was this hazing initiation. Again, this happened to me. Questions like that, and you just listen and be in tune with the team. If something continues to be wrong, and ask more questions like, hey, is there something at work that's getting after you, or is it home? You know, where you don't just ignore people that are having difficult times. You know people. You know when they're up. You know when they're. It's not like you have to have it perfect. You have to have the responsibility to treat your team and people you work with dignity and respect. If they're having a hard time, ask them. And you could be helping with something else that may have nothing to do with work. And it could be something, again, this person being put over a barrel or a stool, and other people behind them going up and rubbing parts of their person against this other person. The question is, so what? Okay, and I'll type this in. So what does this mean? Well, summarize in a couple of words, and I'd like to hear from all of you as we end. What does this mean right under our nose? Well, we did the investigation. We found out it was clear fault. In a company that fired people rarely, if ever, we fired the ringleaders of this immediately. This was in a small town.
I don't have plans of being an HR manager, but I think that, like
In town, and getting fired from there was a big deal. We had to repair, and I think we did, repaired the damage to these poor people that were victimized by this. This is real. That was not a...
treating people as people.
Okay.
Wow.
Other examples that I've dealt with include other people physically, I'm trying to be delicate in how I say this, rubbing parts of their person on other people that you would even think, why would that ever happen? Where we took action, terminated people. Foul mouth issues, jokes, other things like that where we've taken action, and plain old mean behavior.
Really have to look at it as a...
There now, most people are smart enough not to do this, but there are people that just don't care. Very good. Thank you. Lynn Ann?
I so what several people
Just brush this under the rug. Every time I've had these come up, every company I've worked in, they said, oh my gosh, let's take care of this, and we have. But the responsibility is on you as HR people and managers to find these issues, correct them, and get taken care of. One of the issues that's out there now is same-gender attraction, where that are uncomfortable. They'll ask somebody of the same gender to go out on a date. Anymore in the workplace. You have to monitor that, and anybody, whether it's opposite sex or the same sex, that stuff has to be monitored, and making sure that that's as best it can be. So it's a complicated thing.
This is
Guys have seen about this concept of harassment that you think fit this discussion and would share?
example that's kind of a joke gone awry. I've got one coworker that's been trying for about the past 2 months to diet, and she's addicted to chocolate.
Okay.
And many of us have the same addictions of the grave that people can fall into, and they may think they're being funny, oblivious to the fact that they're hurting others, and it's just, we have to watch. You're just not as happy. And it got to the point that the person died didn't want to come to work because she knew that as soon as she got there, her diet would be antagonized and her diet would be sabotaged.
So that everyone feels safe.
Guess what? That's a hostile work environment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody said that.
Saboteur numerous times, and it finally took her almost breaking down in tears and saying, I don't want to work with you anymore. You have made my life a sheer hell. Don't do this to me anymore. And the saboteur kind of had a light bulb moment and went,
And get more work done if they have a better work environment.
Okay, I agree with that 100%. Every one of those examples were awesome. So, you know what? It's a great discussion. We're a couple minutes over. You start out thinking it's funny, but again, this comes back to the eye of the beholder. This was causing real trauma for this person, correct? Again, remind you to keep track of how many of these you've come to or watch, because we want harassment in the workplace that you know of and saw or knew of somebody else that addressed it or had it.
Had it. His was different though. He was working in, he was a teacher, but he was also a coach. How much playing time the daughter was getting and why she wasn't starting and stuff like that. And it was, and they ended up firing him because he didn't do what they wanted him to do. And it was awful. He loved coaching, and to watch him get to where he hated it was very